Looks like it's two, almost three after, so let's go ahead and get started. So first, we have a disclaimer. The following presentation is provided to North San Diego County Association of Realtors members and other real estate professionals for informational purposes only and not as legal advice or to define the real estate profession's standard of care. The instructor's views are their own and do not represent the association's position. For advice regarding specific questions, please contact the appropriate professional. And as Jacob mentioned, we're going to take questions as we go, so feel free to post them in the chat function and we'll answer them as quick as we can. Or if it's a topic or question that's going to be covered on an upcoming slide, we'll probably just wait until we get to that particular slide. So again, this is called Unraveling the Mystery of 1031 Exchanges and Delaware Statutory Trusts. And one of the reasons I've always kind of named it this is that we get people who call us all the time and say, I've talked to three or four people, I get three or four different answers. I'm really confused as to what matters. There's all sorts of strategic issues involved with planning a 1031 exchange, et cetera. So today we want to kind of walk through kind of the more important aspects of the 1031 exchange, what really matters, what really qualifies. I'll point out the areas where there is confusion, why there's confusion, and again, sum it up with what really matters. And that way you can help your clients make a better informed investment decision when they're going through sale and purchase transactions. That's my QR code there if you want to download my contact information. And then my co-speaker is Jacob Driver. He's Vice President of Investments with 1031 Capital Solutions. And we're going to be talking about Delaware Statutory Trust this afternoon as well, or sorry, this morning. And that's a great option for, just basically another tool in the toolbox. So we'll cover that as well. Having said that, I'll introduce our company first, and then when Jacob comes on, he can introduce more about his company. Exeter 1031 Exchange Services is a qualified intermediary. A lot of folks call us an accommodator, a facilitator. We handle all types of 1031 exchanges. We cover all 50 states. We cover the U.S. territories. The first thing to point out as well is a lot of what you see on the internet today or brochures will say things like you cannot exchange foreign property. And that's not correct or not true. What they're really trying to say is you can't sell foreign property and 1031 exchange into U.S. property, or you can't sell U.S. property and 1031 exchange into foreign property. But if you own a rental, investment, or business use property in a foreign country and the sale of that property will trigger a U.S. tax consequence, you can certainly do a 1031 exchange, but it has to be selling foreign property and then exchanging into other foreign property. And as long as they're all held for rental, investment, or business use, that will qualify. It will defer the U.S. tax consequences, but of course not the foreign property taxes that might apply. And we're one of the few qualified intermediaries that has any kind of regulatory oversight. And I bring that up because it's critical. A lot of folks just assume that our industry is licensed or is regulated, and the 1031 exchange qualified intermediary industry doesn't have any licensing or regulatory capabilities or a regulatory body of any kind. So qualified intermediaries are not licensed and not regulated unless they go down a different path. And we wanted to be regulated, so we went down a different path, and I'll explain that in a minute. Exeter 1031 has been around 20 years. This is personally my 41st year doing 1031 exchanges. So we've got a lot of experience doing 1031 exchange transactions. We're more consultative. We can help brainstorm, answer questions, etc. And as I mentioned, we're regulated. So we went down the banking path. We took a couple of years of going through the review, the exams, the audits, the background checks. And it took a while to get our own trust company charter. But we're now licensed, regulated, and audited by the Division of Banking. And so that makes us one of the few qualified intermediaries that has any kind of government oversight, regulatory oversight, which is critical. I've been doing this for 41 years. I've seen a lot of exchange companies fail. Most of them would have been prevented had there been government oversight. And that's one of the real reasons, the most important reasons that we wanted to be regulated. We have all the usual insurance, and it also gives us the ability to roll out other products. So, one of the ones that we do a lot of work in the area of is self-directed IRAs, self-directed 401k plans, where investors want to buy real estate or deeds of trust or mortgages or tax lien certificates, et cetera, inside their retirement account as an investment. So that's one of the areas we specialize in. Having said that, that's kind of our little introduction or commercial there. I'll jump right into the topic. So we're talking about 1031 exchanges today, and then we'll be talking about Delaware Statutory Trust as an investment option, which is a great tool for your toolbox to help you get more transactions, get more listings, help your clients solve problems, things like that. So 1031 exchange has been around actually 103 years. It's section 1031 of the tax code, been around a long time. It's all about deferring taxes. So it allows them to defer the taxes when they sell rental property, investment property, or business use property. So it's really about deferring the taxes, keeping all the equity in their pocket. That allows them to then exchange into larger properties, multiple properties, improving their cash flow, and ultimately improving their net worth. So it's really about not paying taxes, keeping the equity in their pocket, and keep it working, which means it'll generate more transactions for you. With each 1031 exchange, there's at least one sale and one purchase, but there's often 2 or 3 or 4 purchases. So can be a great way for you to build your business and generate transactions around rental, investment, or business use property. And a lot of clients will ask us, what's the best way to take advantage of the 1031 exchange? How should I do it? When should I do it? Or when should I not do it? So again, it's all about deferring taxes, but I think investors often look at it as a transaction tool. I'm selling property. I want to defer the tax. I'm going to do a 1031 exchange, and it's just that transaction. But it's really a long-term wealth building strategy over their lifetime. Each time they sell real estate, they keep doing 1031 exchanges. They defer, they defer, they defer. And then when they pass on, they can leave the property to their heirs, kids, grandkids, friends, whomever. And if it's done properly, those heirs are going to receive that property and get a step up in cost basis. So let's assume you bought property years ago for $100,000. Maybe today it's worth $1 million, just to keep the numbers easy. And you pass on. Your heirs will inherit that property, and their cost basis is stepped up or increased to the fair market value at the date of death, which would be $1 million. So now the heirs who inherited the property now have a cost basis of 1 million. The property value is worth 1 million. They could sell the property the next day for $1 million. They have a cost basis of 1 million. They pay 0 taxes. So it's really a long-term wealth building strategy, and then you can pass it on to kids or grandkids, and they don't have to worry about the capital gain taxes or the depreciation recapture taxes. So we kind of have a morbid sense of humor. We call it swap until you drop. Keep exchanging until you pass on. Leave the property to kids, grandkids, etc. Having said that, let's talk about the 3 primary strategies or structures for a 1031 exchange. There's forward 1031 exchanges. That's where you sell first, which was what most people do. This is actually 97% of our transaction volume. They sell first, and then you reinvest within the 180-day window, which we'll talk more about. There's also reverse 1031 exchanges. Now, reverse 1031 exchanges allow you to go out, find the property you want. There is no deadline up front. Take all the time you want in looking at the properties and doing your due diligence, etc. And then you can go under contract and actually close on the purchase of your new property right away before you close on the sale of your current property. So it takes a lot of the risk out of the 1031 exchange process because you're actually closing on your new property. Now that sounds great, but this is only 3% of our transaction volume, and I'll explain kind of why. Number one, the IRS doesn't allow the client to actually take title to the new property. They can't own both properties at the same time. So in most cases, we as the qualified intermediary, have to set up an LLC, and that LLC will actually be assigned into the transaction. They become the buyer. The purchase and sale agreement is assigned to that entity. And when the closing occurs, the legal title is going to be deeded into that LLC. So it's what they call a parking arrangement. And parking arrangements is what makes it so complicated. Traditional lenders don't like them. Certainly, hard money, private money, asset based lenders, credit unions will usually work with those. But the traditional lenders, which are typically the ones that have a better interest rate, they won't play ball because we have to hold title to the property. So it takes a lot of the risk out of the 1031 exchange, but they're a lot more complicated. There's more costs involved. So that's why it's only about 3% of our transaction volume. But in some cases, clients are trying to do a regular 1031 exchange. The sale of their current property goes south for some reason. If they don't purchase the new property, they're going to lose it. So they're kind of forced into doing a reverse exchange. Other clients actually do reverse 1031 exchanges on purpose because it takes all the risk out of that 45-day identification window because you know you've got your new property. The third structure is an improvement 1031 exchange, or people also call it a build-to-suit 1031 exchange or a construction 1031 exchange. You don't see a whole lot of those because you've got to get permits, you've got to do the construction all during that 180-day window, and that's pretty tough. If you're making a few capital improvements, it's probably very doable. If you're doing a ground up project, there's just no way you're going to get that done in a 6-month period. So very difficult to do that. Okay, having said that, we're going to jump into kind of the structure, how to actually do the 1031 exchange.
Hey,
Number
Bill,
one, yep.
we did have a question. I don't know if you want to touch it just while we're on the topic, but
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Susanna had asked, is a reverse 1031 exchange similar to a bridge loan?
Good question. So they're two different animals. So the reverse exchange, of course, allows you to buy the new property first. And in a lot of cases, you can use a bridge loan to actually take care of that. So the bridge loan can actually be the financing mechanism. And a lot of bridge fund or bridge loan lenders will allow us to take title to the property and they'll work with that. So especially if you have a good relationship with a lender or banking organization, et cetera, they may be willing to talk about that. And bridge financing is a great way to do reverse 1031 exchanges. So great question. And then having said that, the first step is make sure that the 1031 exchange is set up and in place before closing. This is critical. We get calls literally every week where they say, I closed escrow yesterday or last week or last month, and it's too late. Even some of them will say, well, no, it can't be. I mean, I told escrow I'm going to do a 1031 exchange, so don't disperse the funds. The problem is when the closing occurs, the 1031 exchange has not been set up and put in place. Therefore, the client, even if the funds have not been dispersed, the client has the right to receive the funds. So it's taxable. There's no way to go back and undo that. And the reason for that is when you set up the exchange, the purchase and sale agreement is assigned to us as the qualified intermediary. So we literally step into your shoes, we become the seller, and that's what allows you to defer the taxes. If the exchange is not set up and in place prior to closing, you have the right to the proceeds when the closing occurs. So no matter what happens to the money, it's too late. It's taxable at that point. So it's critical to get this set up prior to closing. And the exchange company really does a couple of things. We prepare or draft all the documents to structure the 1031 exchange. Part of that process should be reviewing all the transaction documents to see if there's any issues. A lot of exchange companies don't do that, but we do. We review them to see if we see any potential problems. The third or second area is that we're going to receive the funds if it's a regular 1031 exchange and hold them. And our job is to safeguard the funds. And that's one of the reasons we set up the trust company so that all client funds are held by a regulated entity. And third, I think, is just as important as the others, which is we're consultative. So, these things should be simple. They're not. They're complicated. You need somebody where you can bounce ideas off of them, structure strategies, and kind of get some, independent opinions as to what may qualify and what have you. So I'm going to go over this one really quick because we've kind of already talked about it, but nobody ever talks about how to safeguard your funds. Funds are held by a qualified intermediary. qualified intermediaries hold a lot of money for a lot of people. Um, they typically hold more money than escrow companies and title companies for sure. In a lot of cases, we hold more funds than a small community bank does. And so you have to make sure that your funds are protected, and that's critical. And that's one of the reasons we decided to go down the path of becoming a regulated entity and get the trust company set up. So regulatory oversight is critical. You want to make sure they have bonding insurance, and that kind of outlines the different insurance that's necessary. You also want to make sure that you always have the funds held in a qualified trust account or a qualified escrow account. And again, that's one of the reasons we went through the process of getting Exeter Trust Company set up, because we offer a qualified trust account for every single client at no additional cost. So that's critical to protect the clients. This slide is probably the most important slide deck out there. Um, Qualified use is really the most important part, and that is that all the properties you are selling and purchasing through the 1031 exchange transaction have to be held for some type of rental or lease activity, so cash flow. So you rent the property out or lease the property out, and you're collecting cash flow on that. But you also see a lot of stuff on the internet where it says you have to hold the property for rental. That's not completely true. I mean, most people do rent the property out. It's producing some kind of cash flow. But you could also buy real estate and hold it for capital appreciation, or what we call hold for investment. That also qualifies. So it doesn't have to produce cash flow, but it does have to produce or be held for some type of investment purpose. And the third area is you can certainly buy real estate and use it in your business. So if you need a little office building, a retail shop, a warehouse, whatever it might be, you can buy that as part of your exchange and you can actually use it in your business. And that also qualifies. The reason this area gets so much confusion out there is really the length of time that you hold title to property. We get a lot of folks who will say, I've been told that I don't qualify because I didn't hold the property for at least a year and a day, to 18 months, 2 years. Well, what is it? How long do I have to hold title to the property? So the biggest takeaway today is the tax code and the regulations do not have any holding period. There's nothing that says you have to hold the property for X number of months or years. What it does say is you have to have the intent to hold the property for rental, investment, or business use. So the longer you hold the property for investment or rental or business use, the easier it is to prove that was your intent. So that's why people get hung up on the length of time. But the real issue is the intent. So if you get audited, can you prove that you had the intent to hold the property for rental investment purposes? That's why people get hung up on the length of time. So a couple of thoughts there to kind of show you what that means. Investors who are in the business of buying real estate and then doing something to the property, whether it be a builder, developer, or contractor, where they buy, build, and sell, whether it be a rehab or flipper, where they buy, rehab, and sell or flip the property, whether it be a condo conversion specialist, where they buy multifamily, convert to condos, and sell. In those cases, their intent is to buy and do something to the property and then sell it. So they're holding for sale. They're not holding for investment purposes. And that's the critical. So those don't qualify for 1031 exchange treatment. Now, or if they buy property and do whatever they're going to do to the property and then hold it as rental or investment property, it would qualify. So a lot of folks, again, they get hung up on the length of time. But here's a couple of examples. There's two tax court cases. Both were developers, both bought dirt, both were going to build single family homes and then sell. In these two cases, neither one built anything. One held the dirt for 12 years, another held the dirt for 20 years. Both ended up selling, doing 1031 exchanges. Both got audited and both were disallowed. Even though it's a very long-term holding period, the issue there is their intent was to buy, build, and sell. So they're holding it as inventory. So a 20-year holding period did not make any difference. On the flip side, we had one of our clients who sold at an exchange, bought a condo here in Coronado Island, didn't read the CC&Rs until after closing. Within a few days, quickly found out that the property had to be held for owner, not rental purposes. So immediately sold, did another exchange, and as luck would have it, he was audited by the California Franchise Tax Board. They are a lot more difficult than the IRS. Let's just put it that way. That's a politically correct way of saying that, I think. Um, but the franchise tax board actually allowed his exchange to qualify because he could prove, even though he held it for just a month and a half, that his intent was to hold for rental purposes, but there was a business reason why he couldn't. So they allowed the exchange to qualify. I wouldn't test the franchise tax board very often with that, but that's an example where a very short-term hold could work. So it's really all about what can you prove in terms of intent, not necessarily the holding period. So when folks ask me, how long should I hold title to it? If it's my response would be if it's a plain vanilla transaction, it's rental property on both sides. You've got a nice long-term holding period on the sales side. Holding the new property for a year is probably fine. 1 year straddles 2 tax periods, 2 tax returns. Plenty of proof that was what your intention was. If, on the other hand, you're pushing the envelope, maybe the house you're selling was a primary residence a year ago. Maybe the house you're buying, you want to convert to a primary residence in a year or two. Then I might rent it on both sides for at least 2 years, which straddles 3 tax periods. Now, again, these are just opinions. There are opinions. We're a little more conservative than others. So again, it boils down to what can you prove? Can you prove your intent was to hold for rental investment? Or does it look like it was really intended for personal use? And that's what it boils down to. With that, let's go into the next area, which has lots of misinformation and confusion out there as well, and that's like-kind property. There is a lot of curriculum out there still today that I see where it says if you sell a condo, you have to buy a condo. If you sell apartments, you have to buy apartments. None of that is true. A like kind is actually really easy. Like kind means you are selling real estate, you have to buy real estate. So anything that is considered real property will qualify for 1031 exchange treatment. Even things you wouldn't even think of, and we'll go into the next slide, which will cover that. But I want to back up real quick. So the only exception to this is it has to be foreign property exchanged for other foreign property, or it has to be U.S. or domestic property exchanged for other U.S. or domestic property. Other than that, it's just got to be real estate for real estate. Non-real estate no longer qualifies for 1031 exchange treatment. So this list gives you a quick overview of what they consider like-kind property. All of these are like-kind to each other. You can exchange between all of these asset classes, and it still qualifies for 1031 exchange treatment. That includes things you wouldn't even think about, which is air rights and water rights, mineral rights, certain types of oil and gas investments, fractional ownership like a tenant in common or Delaware Statutory trust, which we'll talk more about. So all of those are considered like-kind property. We've done exchanges of vineyards and timberland and cell site towers and billboards and all sorts of things. So as long as the asset that they're selling or buying is defined as real estate under state law, it's going to qualify. So very broad definition of what you can 1031 exchange in and out of, and a great way for you to help your client reposition their portfolio to meet whatever their goals and objectives are. Now, there's certain things that are non-like-kind properties, so you have to be careful there. Investors don't always realize that their primary residence or a second home or a vacation property, anything used for personal use or excessive personal use, doesn't qualify, but it's not held for rental, investment, or business use. So anything like that will not qualify. However, you can change intent, you can change usage. So if it's your primary residence, you move out. We'll talk more about that at the very end, but you can move out, convert it to investment property, maybe rent it for 2 years to show that was your intent. And then you could certainly do a 1031 exchange on that. So a lot of planning opportunities there, which is key. This slide gets really complicated, so I'm just going to do kind of a quick overview. This is where you can be a huge help and add a lot of value to your clients. Clients often think they own real estate, but they might not. For example, if they own real estate with 3 or 4 or 5 people through an LLC, the LLC, because it has multiple members, is treated as a partnership for tax purposes. So the individual members, they don't own real estate. They own a partnership interest, and the partnership owns the real estate. So when the partnership sells real estate, if the partnership does the 1031 exchange, nice and clean. So the LLC partnership can sell, do the exchange, and buy replacement property as a partnership. It's when the members don't want to stay together, they break up, they all want to go different directions. They think that they can just take the cash distribution from the partnership and then go do a 1031 exchange. Unfortunately, they didn't sell real estate. They're just getting cash out of the partnership, and that doesn't qualify. There are all sorts of ways to solve the problem. So one of the things you can do for your clients is if they own real estate in some kind of a multiple member LLC, a limited partnership, a general partnership, a corporation, ask them what their exit strategy is and suggest they talk to their legal or tax advisors, or we'd be happy to talk to them as well, and kind of set the stage for what they might want to do when they're ready to exit the real estate. And you will be doing them a huge favor because you've solved the headache before it becomes a headache. So that's really something to keep in mind is we have to drill down and figure out who's the real taxpayer in each of those examples.
Bill, we got another question
Oh,
here
go
in the
ahead.
chat, too. It is in regard to, the two case studies that you gave about the developers and the difference between owning a piece of dirt for appreciation and owning it as inventory. Can you kind of clarify a little bit of why those developers, holding for inventory was different than if you and I bought dirt to hold for appreciation?
Great question, because it obviously none of us would buy real estate if it wasn't for held for investment of some type. So for 1031 exchange purposes, the government's trying to encourage people to stay invested and hold the property. So they define it differently. If you're in the business of buying, in this case, developers buying dirt to build, and their intent is to build and then sell, it's like inventory in a retail business. You buy it, you put it on the shelf, you sell it. So you're really holding it for sale. And they've specifically defined that as doesn't qualify as qualified use. But if they're in the business of buying the real estate and holding it for long-term, either appreciation, long-term rental, something like that, then it does qualify. So they're really differentiating between, is it considered inventory being held for sale, or is it really being held for a capital appreciation, et cetera? And there's obviously a fine line there. It can get a little fuzzy in terms of trying to define which one it is. The good news there is it's relatively easy to change intent. So let's say that the developer thought, the real estate market has changed. Maybe my business model has changed. COVID-19 changed a lot of things for a lot of people. And if the developer said, now I'm going to hold this dirt for appreciation, they could change the way they report it on their tax returns. So instead of held for development, they would label it as held for investment. And on financial statements, loan applications, emails back and forth between you guys and the clients is a great way to, hold for investment. Then you can easily document that the intent changed, and they can document that it's been held for investment for a couple of years. Their exchanges would have qualified. So I hope that answered the question. It's a little confusing, I know, but it's all about, is it inventory held for sale, or is it real estate held for investment? And what can you prove? And it's relatively easy to change intent just by documenting what your intention is.
In kind of on that same note, Bill, with the intent and the paper trail, if these folks have clients that say, hey, I'm selling a rental property, I want to buy something else so that I'm going to move into it in a year. That's something that's a good example of you don't want your clients to put that into a paper trail anywhere, because that's proving their intent the other way. And if an audit would happen, that's something that could potentially affect the stability of that exchange, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Good point. It's the old smoking gun. So if the investor sends you, if the investor's working with you as an agent, they send you an email and it says, I'm shopping for a property. It's going to be my primary residence. However, I want a 1031 exchange into it. that's the smoking gun. And if the IRS gets a hold of that email, they can say, well, your intention was really to live there. So the best thing is exactly what Jacob said. Do not put it in writing. Shop for investment property. All the emails should refer to investment property. That's what it needs to be held for. In that case, if you're going to move into it, which is okay, it's perfectly okay to convert usage. I would personally rent it for 2 years. That's going to straddle 3 tax periods. For example, if you do it today, you could rent it the rest of this year, all of 2026, go into January or February 2027. That's going to be what, 19 months ish. But it's 3 tax periods. So that's probably the minimum I would do just to be safe. We're more conservative, but I don't like to do battle with the IRS or the Franchise Tax Board. And then you can certainly, change the intent, change the usage at that point, get rid of the tenants and move into it and convert it to your primary residence. That does not trigger a tax consequence because you haven't sold anything. You've just converted it from a rental to a primary residence. You would change the way you report it at that point from a rental to a primary residence, and everything is all good. So it's really that first, say, 2 years ish that you have to be able to show it really was intended to be held as a rental property, and make sure you do. You hold it as a rental property, then you're in great shape and you could certainly convert it to a primary residence later. Um, Having said that, so when the sale of the current property closes, that triggers your deadlines, and the deadlines are really, really tough. The 45 days moves very quickly. So when the sale closes, let's say it closes today, tomorrow is day number one, and you've got exactly 45 calendar days to actually identify what you're going to buy. That's a tough one. So a couple of ideas for you to use with your clients. Again, the deadlines only start running when the closing occurs. It's not when you sign the contract or when you open escrow, it's when the closing actually occurs. So you can extend the closing and buy yourself more time to help the client find the replacement property. That's key. So it could be that you just say, buyers, I need a cooperative buyer. I need a long-term escrow. I need options to extend. If the buyer says, look, I need access to the property now, you could rent it. You could do a lease with an option to buy. As long as you tie up the buyer but don't close, then the deadlines don't start running. Same on the purchase side. If they find property with you that they really like, same thing. If you can tie it up and get the seller to kind of go along with it. So it could be a lease with option to buy or rent the property from the seller or go under contract and do a long-term escrow or options to extend until you're ready to sell and close on the entire transaction. So it's all about the timing, lining everything up and making sure that the close of the sale occurs first and then the closing of the purchase closes next. They can close concurrently on the same day. It's a little tough to do that, but it can be done. Or it can close within a few days. There's no minimum holding period between the two. As soon as you're ready to close on the purchase, you can do that. So it's all about the timing and kind of keeping an eye on that. And one of the big benefits with the Delaware Statutory Trust, which has taken a little bit of Jacob's thunder, is helping with this 45-day ID period. I'll let him go into more detail on that. After the 45 days to identify what you acquire or going to acquire, then you have an additional 135 days to actually complete the transaction. So that means you actually close on the purchase of your new replacement property. So it's 45 days to ID, an additional 135 days to close for a total of 180 days. It's not 45 plus 180. And a lot of investors think it's 45 plus 180. It's not. If they're looking for that, they're going to accidentally go over the deadline and be in trouble. So it's 45 plus 135 for a total of 180. Excuse me. And then, during that 45-day window, they have to identify what they're going to acquire. Almost everyone uses the 3-property rule because they're selling one property and probably going to buy another property of equal or greater value. And so that means they can identify up to 3 properties, but not more than 3 properties. Usually the idea there is they identified 3, they're really going to buy one, and the second and third are backup properties. It works great in a normal market. Unfortunately, in today's market, the second and third properties are probably long gone, as you know. So doesn't work as well in this kind of a market. Or if you get clients who are looking at the Delaware Statutory Trust or looking at a bunch of smaller properties, they're probably going to look at the 200% rule. The 200% rule is this. Let's say you sell an asset for $5 million. 200% of that is $10 million. They can identify as many properties as they want, up to $10 million in total value. So the three property rule has a limit of three properties of any value. The 200% limit has no limit on the number of properties, but it has a limit on the value, 200% of the gross sale price. The 95% exception, you don't see it a whole lot. It's really designed for a portfolio acquisition. As an example, we had a lady recently who identified 40 single family properties. We called her and said, look, it's way over three, it's way over 200%. It's not going to qualify unless you buy 95% of the value that you identified. In her case, she said, I'm buying it from one seller, one contract, one closing. I either buy all or I buy none. So since she purchased 100%, she falls under the 95% exception. She bought at least 95% of the value. That's an exception, and she still qualifies. And that gets complicated, so we're always available to jump on a call and kind of help you walk through the process and help you through that. Next is the reinvestment requirement. How much do we have to reinvest in order to defer all the taxes? And a lot of investors assume that all you have to invest is either your equity that's coming out of the sale, the cash, or you have to reinvest the taxable gain, the profit that comes out of the sale. Neither one of those are correct. So again, keeping it simple, let's just say you sell an asset for $1 million. You are allowed to subtract your routine selling expenses. You subtract that, that's going to get you a net sale price of about $950, and that's the magic number. Notice we did not subtract mortgage or anything like that. So if they sell for $1 million, they subtract the routine selling expenses, which is your broker's commission, title, escrow, documentary transfer tax, things like that. That'll get them the net of $950. That's what they have to buy. So as long as whatever they purchase, whether it's one or two or three or four properties, if the total purchase is $950 or greater, they have remained fully invested at that level, and they get to defer all the taxes. So it's all about buying property that's equal or greater in value at that net sale price level. They have to reinvest all their equity if they want to defer all the taxes, and they have to replace the debt either with new debt, or they can certainly buy the new property with all cash, not have any debt, and that's still considered okay. Partial exchanges are okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But first, I want to flip it over to Jacob so that he can talk more about Delaware Statutory Trust and how that can be a great tool in your toolbox.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. Just to kind of reiterate who I am and why it should matter to you. Again, my name is Jacob Driver. I'm the Vice President of Investments over here at 1031 Capital Solutions. We are a company that specializes in tax deferral and investment strategies specifically for real estate investors. So there's many different options of how to defer taxes, how to sell a property or some kind of an asset and buy something to replace that within a transaction. By and large, the most common one that we see is people using a 1031 exchange into that vehicle called a Delaware Statutory Trust, which is just a type of fund that you can invest into through a 1031 exchange, which is a pretty rare thing. Like Bill had referenced how limited partnerships and LLCs and REITs and other forms of passive real estate don't typically count as like-kind property. A DST and a tenant in common are the two, passive forms of real estate that do. And why this matters to you as a realtor, like Bill was saying, as a tool in your toolbox, is this is a market for you as realtors to be able to effectively grow your business in a very competitive market. There's essentially this group of property owners that's untapped. And for those of you that have been in the industry for a long time and you have some clients that own rental properties, you're able to do no marketing and leverage the relationships that you already have with your clients to, effectively get more listings. And so there's the landlord retirement market that we're going to talk about here a little bit more, and then we're going to go into more detail on DST specifically as well. And before I jump into everything, similar to Bill, I have to go through some disclosures here. The contents of this presentation are not an offer to sell, nor a solicitation of an offer to buy any security, which DSTs are. So all of that can only be made by reviewing a prospectus for one of those. Investing into real estate and 1031 exchange replacement may not be suitable for all investors and may involve significant risks. So these risks include, but are not limited to, lack of liquidity, limited transferability, conflicts of interest, real estate fluctuations, all of those types of risks that you guys know as being invested into real estate. And it's important to know that neither myself or Bill are our tax or legal advisors, even though we are talking about tax and legal strategies. Always want to make sure that you're referencing the proper types of legal people when you're talking about those types of looking for that kind of advice. Go ahead, Bill. So helping aging landlords solve one of their biggest problems. So a lot of your clients, I'm sure, are baby boomers. They've owned portfolios of real estate for a long, long time, and they're getting to the point of their lives where they're trying to simplify things. There's nearly 1 million baby boomer landlords in California. Some of them own many rental properties, and they have that desire to retire and simplify their lives. But they don't know that there's options out there. Some of them think, well, I know about the 1031 exchange, but I don't want to go jump back into another piece of real estate because it's going to give me all the same headaches that I have right now. So why would I do that? So having some options for them to be able to sell their property, defer their capital gains taxes, and invest into something that they don't have to be directly involved with gives a lot of your clients an option to get out of the situation they don't want to be in. So you get to be the person that brings them the strategy that solves all of their problems. And now you'll ultimately get that listing that you ultimately wouldn't have had if they didn't know there was this option for them. So there's, complicated tax strategy stuff, but in the background that, my company and my firm specializes in, and this is what we do all day, every day. And we're happy to be a resource for all of you when you're looking to offer some kind of tax strategies and solutions for your clients. So what are some of the challenges of being a landlord today? Some of the common ones that we get is we're just tired of answering phone calls. That something breaks every other month. We're spending a bunch of money, and time and expenses are getting more expensive over time, especially for our clients in California. The regulatory environment is getting harder. The rent control is getting harder. It's getting, it's not as lucrative for these people that have earned their wealth over the past 10, 20, 30 years in this, direct real estate investment strategy. And now they just are looking to get something more passive. So they're tired of committing all of their time, energy, and effort to something where they have to, they're not getting that same satisfaction that they got 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so giving them an option of something that they can do that gets rid of all of those headaches without having to pay that, egregious tax bill is something very attractive to your clients, and you're able to bring them a strategy that really will be able to solve all of these problems for them. So again, some of the common reasons that, if you talk to your clients about why they don't want to sell, they don't want to have to pay the taxes. They don't want to have to go through another escrow and get in that day 45 time frame and get nervous about the inventory and where things are at. Maybe they have a loan on the property and they're retired now and they don't have the same amount of income they did when they got that loan, so they won't be able to qualify for that. So there are ways to mediate all of these reasons that they wouldn't ultimately sell the property, and you're able to bring this solution to them and let them know that there is a way for them to solve all of these problems without having to go out and buy physical property they'd manage anymore. Next slide, please. So the three questions to getting that next listing for those of you that do have investor clients is, do you own rental property? how do you like being a landlord these days, and why haven't you sold your property yet? And, you know, as all of you know, finding out those pain points is a really simple way for you guys to offer up your insights and offer the solutions that just being by on these webinars, I can tell that the people here are the ones that are looking for solutions for their clients and looking to learn and help, you know, better serve their clients and their people that are trying to add value to their lives. So just by being here, I know that you're trying to help your clients out and know about some of those options and what you can do. So asking those 3 simple questions and bringing solutions is a way for you to really bring value. And so now you know about, you know, the general sense of what you can do, but when you drill down to what is a DST, well, here are all of the reasons that in our experience are the reasons why people have been attracted to this solution at all. So the first reason is that, like we've talked about, these do qualify for a 1031 exchange. So these were written into the tax code with their own revenue ruling 21 years ago, with the revenue ruling 2004-86. So even though a lot of our clients are just learning about the strategy now, it has been something that's been around since the 80s, and it's got its own revenue ruling for the past 21 years now. One of the most attractive features outside of that tax deferral is the passive nature of these investments. You get all of the same benefits as any traditional piece of real estate. You get that monthly income, you get the potential for growth, you get the tax advantage income of, you know, being able to add depreciation against it, writing off the loan interest, and all of those different advantages of real estate, without having to have any of the direct, you know, management relationship or direct involvement with the property itself. What retail investors like you and I usually have access to, even if we pulled our money together, we might be able to go out and buy a, you know, 10-unit building or 20-unit apartment or something like that. And with a Delaware Statutory trust, you have access to $200-300 million properties or portfolios that are managed by these institutional billion-dollar real estate companies. So you get the advantage of, you know, being a retail investor, being able to invest a couple $100,000 or a couple $1 million into this big, beautiful Class A apartment building in Denver, Colorado, for example, or an industrial warehouse leased to Amazon or some credit-rated company. And so you're getting access to these types of asset classes that retail investors don't typically have access to. And there's a wide variety of investment options within DSTs. They can be apartments, they can be industrial properties, they can be self-storage facilities. They're even as niche as, you know, a student housing facility or a senior living community. Any kind of sector of the real estate market that you can think of, there's DSTs in that space to accommodate whatever strategies your clients might be interested in. And at the end of the day, you know, we'll leverage our expertise of the market, but your clients are the ones that are ultimately in charge of picking their specific opportunities and investment strategies that they'd be going into. And so your client can sell one single family building in one market with one tenant and ultimately invest into a property, a wide variety of portfolios that are diversified against geographic locations, diversified across asset classes and sponsors, to now they have, you know, 30 different tenants across the countries. That's really going to build a lot of stability into their portfolio with diversification as well. And one of the ways that a DST can also simplify an exchange is by replacing that debt. Like Bill had mentioned, a lot of investors have the misconception that all they have to do is replace that equity, but that net sales price is really what you have to replace. So what you sold the property for minus those transactional costs, you have to replace that full value. So if you have a loan, that has to be replaced. But to my point, a lot of investors in retirement don't have access to the income to, you know, be able to qualify for a loan. So there's built-in non-recourse, no application financing in these DSTs, where through strategic planning, we can make sure that the portfolio of options matches up with the loan to value of the property that they sold. So they don't have to go get that new loan. They don't have to add any cash, and they're not looking at any taxable boot, because we were able to, you know, match up their loan to value as well. There's 2 main exit strategies within DSTs. There are properties that are similar to, traditional real estate where you go with that swap till you drop option, where you can have the option to 1031 exchange time and time again and choose to go in and out of passive and active strategies. So you can go from a DST back into direct property. So it's a great vehicle for people in an exchange that are just looking for a backup plan or a backup option. You're getting close to that day 45 and can't find something. You can go put this something into something passive, see if it's something that meets your client's goals, and then they could go back into direct real estate if they choose. But they have the option to stay passive if they want. And there's also a strategy using DSTs where your clients can start with their property today, sell, do a 1031 exchange into a DST, and ultimately end up with partnership units of a real estate investment trust, which is going to be, a widely diversified, actively managed portfolio of real estate across the country. So just getting, a vast amount of diversification again, which is great for those retirees that are really just looking for a set it and forget it investment that's easy for their estate planning purposes as well. This is a very fast and a fully digital transaction. We can usually close on a DST in around 5 business days. So for our clients that know that they want to do this in their exchange, we're never even messing with day 45 at all. You close on the listing on the sale, we can be closed on their DST, a week later after that. And you don't even have to worry about the stress of that day 45 or finding anything. And all of the fees and expenses are all baked into the DST. So they don't have to worry about allocating for closing costs or pulling in any cash to pay for any kind of fees or expenses either. It's all baked into the investment, and it's all very transparent what those are and how they work as well. So this is a great option for you looking for, a way to generate listings for those that are looking to get out of their properties, or just as a backup plan for your clients that might be in an exchange. We have a lot of great resources for you and your clients. We wrote a book called How to Retire from Being a Landlord. We're happy to offer it for free to everybody that's on this webinar. If you want a free copy, just feel free to shoot me an email, or you can get one on our website. You can find it on Amazon, but please don't pay $20 for it. We're happy to send one for you for free for joining our webinar here today. So reach out to me afterwards, and we'd be happy to send you, even if you want 2 copies, one for you and your client, we're happy to send those for you. And we have a bunch of fact sheets and brochures and videos all on our website. We do weekly webinars every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. But if you're looking for us to get pulled into a consultation, we're happy to come to your office and meet with your client and talk about tax strategies or host a special event for your clients or whatever. And we actually have a tool for you as investors as well, where you can use our proprietary software to do cash flow analysis, tax analysis, really add value to your clients by using our software to help them understand their situation a lot better and really get a better understanding of if it makes sense for them to keep that property or go into a different property or go in, cash out and go into the stock market, whatever that might be. You can be the one that adds value to help them really understand the best direction for them in the future of their real estate as well. So here's our information here. If you want to reach out directly to me as well, you can just replace that info with Jacob at 1031 Capital Solutions, and that will come straight to me. Just mention that you were on today's NSDCR website, and we're happy to send you that copy for free. And again, I'm happy to answer questions or do anything as well. And for those of you that haven't done a 1031 exchange in the past, you're lucky that your first exposure is with Bill. I met Bill over a decade ago now when I was looking to do a 1031 exchange with my parents, actually. And he's just, I work with a lot of intermediaries in this industry now, and there's none that hold a candle to Bill and the way that his company operates and the way that they're very consultative. And if you call him at 9 o'clock at night, he'll answer the phone and go through your questions. I wouldn't recommend that you do that, but I've always been just very surprised at the level of expertise and professionalism and service that they commit themselves to. So Bill and Hiba and their whole team over there is phenomenal. And you're lucky that this is your introduction to exchanges as one of the top people in the industry.
Thank you, Jacob. That's probably why I have no hair. And one of the great things about Jacob is, he's also very consultative, so he can work with you and kind of walk through whatever the goals and objectives of the clients are to see what's a good fit. This is just a great tool in your toolbox to help you get listings. As a qualified intermediary, one of the things we get from realtors a lot is, I can't get this client to list with me because they're afraid they can't find something to buy. And so, if even if they want to go out and find their own property through you, so you can represent them on the sale and the purchase, their concern, their fear is, what if I put this in escrow, but I can't close for some reason? Then it becomes a taxable event. So you can always use the Delaware Statutory Trust as the number three identified property as a backup. That's what my wife Hiba and I did, where we were trying to buy a small commercial office building for our trust company years ago. And thank God we had identified the DST as a backup, because the Cheyenne market is a very small market. So without the DST, we would have paid a ton in taxes. So great tool for, depending on what the goals and objectives are, it's a great tool to kind of help solve problems there. I mentioned quickly just before Jacob kicked in there that a partial 1031 exchange is okay. And a lot of what you see on the internet is, you have to trade equal or up in value. You have to reinvest all your equity. You have to replace your debt. And that's true for the most part, because most people want to defer all of their taxes, but you don't have to. You could do a partial 1031 exchange. It's probably the old adage, it's real estate rich, cash poor. A lot of folks go, I have no cash, I need a cash position. So pulling some cash out of the sale and not reinvesting it will not hurt the 1031 exchange. It just means you're going to pay some tax. So maybe they pull $50,000 or $100,000 of cash out, put it in their bank account. They're going to pay tax on that, but everything else would be tax deferred. Sometimes they say, I want to trade down in value because I don't want as much debt as I had before. So maybe they sell for $1 million. You subtract your closing costs, you're at 950 net. Maybe they find a property they buy for 800,000. So from 950 to 800, they're trading down by $150,000. That 150 is 100% taxable. They don't prorate the cost basis or anything. So it's all applied to the taxable gain, but it doesn't hurt the 1031 exchange. Everything else would still be tax deferred. So there's all sorts of reasons why people do partial exchanges on purpose. The one thing you could do to bring a lot of value to your clients is always say, look, you need to meet with your tax advisor, because sometimes they have something else on their tax return that might offset some of the gain. It might be a net operating loss carry forward. It might be a suspended passive activity loss. I mean, there's any number of things that might be on the tax return. So even if they do a partial 1031 exchange, they still may not pay tax. So always start with the tax advisor to make sure they know exactly what they're looking at, and they can kind of go from there. And this is the last slide, which is one of my favorite planning options. And I'm going to use one of our actual clients as an example. This particular client's a husband and wife. They bought property in La Jolla. They owned it and lived in it as their primary residence for 42 years. They were having health issues and wanted to go back east with their family. The problem is their house had an $8 million capital gain. So they're like, we can't do it. We're going to get killed on taxes. Well, the IRS has a ruling out where you can convert it to investment property, and then you get the benefits of both. So what we did is said, move out of the property. Well, number one, first, move back east with your family. That's what you want to do it. Number two, convert the property from your primary residence to investment property. And we recommended 2 years. Again, that's to show intent to convert, intent to hold for rental. So that straddles 3 tax periods. So they rented it for 2 years. Then at that point, they sold the house. And at that point, they could still say they lived in it for 2 out of the last 5 years. So they still got the $500,000 tax-free exclusion. But now they can also say they rented it for 2 years. So now it qualifies for a 1031 exchange transaction. So out of the $8 million gain, they got $500,000 tax-free. They can do whatever they want to do with that. The other $7.5 million in gain was deferred through a 1031 exchange. And whether they go out and buy something, in this case, they bought multifamily property. So now they got some nice cash flow. In a lot of cases, as Jacob said, they get to that point where they don't want all the property management headaches to worry about. So the Delaware Statutory Trust could be a great option, where they get out of the primary, they get into something they don't have to manage, and they just get some nice cash flow. So there's a lot of ways to use and combine the 1031 exchange with other tax sections. Uh, Sometimes you have multiple sales and multiple purchases, so it might be that we have to combine a forward 1031 exchange with a reverse 1031 exchange to, depending on all of the timing, et cetera. So that's a lot of technical stuff. So with that, if you just have issues that come up, we can all jump on a conference call with you, walk through whatever the client's challenges are, and see if we can solve the problem. And if the 1031 exchange is not right for the client, we'll be the first one to talk them out of it, et cetera. So always willing to jump on a call, be very consultative. Jacob could jump on the call with us as well. Kind of walk through whatever the client's goals and objectives are. And with that, we've kind of done a whirlwind tour on 1031 exchanges, and we're right at but that's pretty good timing, right at the 11 o'clock. If there's any follow-up questions, we're happy to take those. Just go ahead and post those in the webinar chat function. Or you've got Jacob's contact information. Let me go back real quick here. And again, he said replace info with Jacob at 1031 Capital Solutions. Or you can reach out to us as well, and we can get either one of us can get the other party involved, and we're happy to brainstorm whatever makes sense there.
Absolutely.
And I don't see any questions. Jacob, any last comments?
No, I don't think so. One thing that kind of popped into my brain when you were talking about the topic was the fact that you would review like the documents going into an exchange with the closing and everything. Can you talk briefly about why that's valuable as far as, identifying any potential exchange boot from something that somebody paid, something that's not a usual closing cost or something like that? That was kind of the first thing that popped into my head, just so they can arm themselves with the knowledge of why they would or wouldn't want to pay something through escrow that could impact a potential exchange.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, one of the things we see some of our competitors do is they just say, "Give me the escrow's contact information, give me the purchase and sale agreement. That's it." We ask for any other supplemental escrow instructions. We ask for the preliminary title insurance report, because it's amazing how many times clients will tell you or tell us that, "Oh, I hold the property in my trust or in my individual name," and then you get the preliminary title report, you find out, it's not the case. They hold it differently. And so we always want to make sure that we know exactly who the quote unquote taxpayer is. And then you hit the nail on the head, is going through the estimated settlement statement. So a day or two before closing, we can go through the estimated settlement statement. We can identify which are considered permissible expenses and what are not. So for example, prorated rents, prorated property taxes, HOA fees, things like that. And there's all sorts of other things that clients slip in and pay at the closing. Sometimes the lender says you got to pay off your credit card statement, so they slip in their credit card bills, things like that. Those are not permissible exchange expenses. And if they used net proceeds to pay for things that are not permissible, it creates a taxable event. In a lot of cases, it's a small dollar amount, so it may not be the end of the world. But if they add up all those non-permissible items, they can put out-of-pocket cash into escrow if they want to cover those, and then it's not taxable. So we kind of help review all of that and point out any issues, identify what's non-permissible. And, a lot of people just say, "I don't care, let's just pay it through escrow." But at least they are aware of it and have the option of reacting to it.
Awesome.
And with that, I think we're in good shape. There's no other follow-up questions. So thank you everyone for joining us for our webinar today. Again, if there's any follow-up questions, happy to chat. We're also happy to, if you'd like us to both do this type of a program to your investors or prospects to help you generate business, happy to do that as well. We're really a support tool to help you get the business. So whatever we can do to help, let us know. Happy to help. And thank you, and look forward to working with you in the future. Take care, everybody.